Replacing the front strut on a 1999 Ford Taurus. There are other videos that are more in-depth than this one on replacing that strut, but they all leave off, at least the ones that I've seen, lowering the subframe, which is something that I have found necessary for replacing that strut. Now, it is possible to push that spring into place without lowering the subframe, but I don't want to do that. This is easier, so that's what this video is detailing how to do. Alright, underneath the car I have a jack that's supporting the body itself on this rigid member that's basically underneath the passenger seat. This jack stand is holding all the basically all the weight of the car. I have a jack, and the jack is set up so that it's touching the subframe. And I have a second jack stand here that's a couple of inches below the subframe. Now what I'm going to do is loosen the subframe bolts, actually basically take them out so the threads aren't engaged, and then I'm going to use this jack to lower the subframe onto this jack stand. The two subframe bolts are here behind the coolant line, and yes, I've already loosened it because I took this out. I'm just doing this again to show you guys the detail. And back here. So I'm going to loosen these up, and then I'm going to lower this until the subframe rests on the jack stand. Alright, here's the one in the rear. I've got it loose, and as you can see, when it comes out it eventually falls. At this point the threads aren't engaged into the frame. That's important because you don't want to have just a couple threads stuck in the frame and then try to lower it, have all that weight on a couple threads. You're going to break those couple of threads. Now in the front, eventually the bolt just comes right out with the rubber, I don't know what to call that, a bushing or a mount or whatever. Now the subframe can gently be lowered down just that couple of inches. That'll give us the extra clearance we need to put everything back together. So now I'm just going to lower it onto the jack stand. Lower the subframe onto the jack stand slowly. And again, I'm only going down as much as I need, just a little bit, less than 4 inches. 4 inches! Because on the other side, I've still got both the bolts in. I don't want to bend or damage those bolts. 4 inches is what basically Ford recommends, that you can let the rear out for doing a steering gear replacement, so I feel comfortable that I'm not damaging anything. So here's the strut I'm putting in. It's a high quality, ready stall. Whatever that means. It's made by Detroit Axle. This isn't actually made in the USA. Just FYI. High quality, ready stall. If you ever need a stall in your car, this is the axle to get. Now that my portable toilet here is in place, I'm going to go ahead and grease up my axle splines. I'm going to put the knuckle in. Alright, so now I've got the strut in. Got the ball joint in, so the steering knuckle's in place. Got the axle back in. Now, of course, I had to do a lot more stuff on this car than simply change the strut, so that's why I had to take all this other stuff off. And I kind of left it off so that you could see better what was going on. So now I'm going to put this inside this. To do that, I'm going to stick a crowbar in between my subframe and my control arm and push down. And this is where it really pays to have that just extra little bit of clearance. There's enough flex in the strut that I can, actually I'm going to have to set the camera down, but basically just wiggle this in there. Hold on one second. Alright, so there we go. And now making sure that this little tab goes in the split, we can just push it in. So now that that's started in the hole, but it's not quite lined up, it won't be quite lined up until this hole in the tab meets this hole. What I'm going to do is put the subframe back into position by just jacking it up and then bolting it into place and setting those two bolts that I took out to 100 foot-pounds. So that's basically the process I use, just supporting the subframe, taking those bolts completely out so I don't screw up the threads. lowering it down, doing what I've got to do, and then raising it back up and reinstalling those bolts. Then of course I torque them to 100 foot-pounds, which I said really quick at the end, but that's the spec on the '99 Ford Taurus.